Hello and welcome back to Interjections. Fresh off a 4-0 thumping of Atalanta. But times are good. I'm your host, Andrew. This is also our Irfan Birthday Edition podcast. Irfan, happy birthday, man.
Thank you, thank you. Can't think of a better way to start the day than with you fine gents and Inter win. So life is good.
Well, it is your birthday. I brought Jay a gift. Jay, in Milan's last 13 competitive fixtures, how many matches have they won?
Um, 10.
You're off by 9. The answer is 1.
I was close.
Very close. We'll get into it. Sterling, welcome back to the pod. Feel like it's been a minute.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a minute. I'm happy to be back. Irfan's not the only one who takes vacation from time to time. I went on a little European excursion, but I'm back, and I saw you guys had some really good fill-ins while I was gone as well. Shout out to Guatam. I thought he was a really good guest. So, yeah, I'm happy to be back and share my thoughts on this Intermercato, this 4-0 drubbing in this Champions League group.
Let's get right into the drubbing. So for yet again, Inzaghi gets the best of Gasperini. He owns this guy, has not lost to him, continues to dominate him at home. This is our second consecutive 4-0 win at home over Gasperini and Atalanta. And it was anticlimactic. 3 minutes in, we get the own goal off the Thuram deflection. Barella with the wonder strike 7 minutes later, and you're up 2-0 before the half. It was a true, to use Irfan's word, blitzkrieg before the half. Now, there's a couple layers I want to discuss, and the first one is I want you to all pick if you were more impressed by Inter's performance or if you're chalking this up to Atalanta absences. So it is worth pointing out they were missing quite a few players. They only started one traditional center back, Dim City, who allowed the own goal, but their right center back and their left center back were basically converted wing backs, midfielders. So when you look at this performance, you look at the thoroughness of this, I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on if you chalk this up to us or them. If you look at Miko's favorite stat, expected goals, our expected goals in the first half were actually lower than Atalanta's. They weren't high, and I don't know the exact reason for that. You could chalk that up to the own goal. You could chalk that up to the improbability of Barella's goal. But I would say the performance on the pitch to me was definitely stronger than Atalanta's. And advanced metrics aside, we were the better team, and it was a thorough domination. So while Atalanta were missing a lot of players, for me, I give us more credit than I give them for missing guys. Sterling, what do you think?
I would agree with that. I think, even before we scored, actually, there was a chance that Darmian kind of flubbed there in the box that if he was a bit sharper, probably would have resulted in at least a shot on target. And then, the football that was being played that led up to the first goal, even though it was kind of a fluky own goal from Jim City, I mean, the football was brilliant, beautiful, pulled Atlanta into positions where they were very uncomfortable. Obviously, Thuram swinging across for Lautaro at the back post, which who knows where that ends up. It could have very easily been a goal. It could have easily gotten cleared, but obviously what happens, happens. But it comes because of the fact that we put Atalanta under such extreme pressure, and that goal doesn't have anything to do with the fact they have other players playing in the center back position. As you mentioned, the only true center back was the one who actually conceded that goal. And I can tell you that the second goal also really had nothing to do with the fact that they didn't have center backs back there because it was a wonder goal from Barella. The other two, maybe, they're kind of like these scrum in the box type goals, and Thuram was just the quickest to it. Maybe a more experienced center defender would have been there to clear a ball a little bit quicker than Zappacosta, who got beat essentially on both of those goals for Thuram to break in there. But no, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Inter. We looked a lot sharper than the first two matches. Obviously, I think the Genoa game, it was what it was. We still created the better chances. There was a couple fluky goals that we let in. Obviously, after that, we we rebounded, had a much stronger match at home, got a really comfortable win. Clean sheets, looked still a little bit lackadaisical at times. And then I think today, the fact that we were excited to play Atalanta, we treated it like it was a big match. You could see that the intensity and focus was much higher. You could see that the play was a lot crisper, a lot sharper. We were moving the ball very quickly. And I think that we were always going to win that game. Realistically, we are just a better team than Atalanta. And, even I made the mistake of kind of looking at Atalanta's lineup and being like, there's some danger there, because I was really focusing on the front three and the midfield four and saying, yeah, there's some players there that could certainly hurt us. But I kind of glossed over the fact that, yeah, that back line is shoddy, especially when they're missing players. Atalanta, to their credit, I mean, they've had a lot of changes in the last 3 to 4 weeks that were unexpected changes. Obviously, they lost their best midfielder to Juventus. Lookman, who's been their best attacker, he got his head turned by PSG. Looked like he was going to leave. He has to sit out the first 2 games of the season. They lost Scamacca to an ACL. Gasparini's already saying that Zaniolo is a gamble that is not paying off. So there's a lot that's going on over there right now. I think that they will probably get better. Gasparini always figures it out, but people were talking about them as a potential Scudetto challenger. I'm just not sure that that's going to happen for them.
All excellent points, Sterling, and I would say, yeah, we talked about the defense. They were missing quite a few players in midfield and attack as well. But if you look down the guys they started, like you have to acknowledge Retegi's going to be their starting forward this year. It's just the way it is. Brescianini scored 2 goals in his first game. Samardzik, we all know about. So there was a full house in attack, and they generated close to no chances, which is worth giving credit to our defense for. Irfan, where do you fall on this?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it was mainly us being just better. I thought we looked really sharp. We looked really crisp, and they had their, they didn't have their best squad out there. But honestly, it just like we talked about in the last episode, it doesn't really matter. We kind of own this team. We dominate them. I think we have a skill superiority and also a mental superiority over these guys, and we're never afraid to flex it and show it. And I think it showed in this match from the very beginning. We were confident. We were out there. There's certain matches where you can tell the team looks a little cagey or looks a little nervous. Like Atalanta matches are just not one of those, and it wasn't the case this time either. Like they came out, they were confident, they're ready to go. They played really well, and I agree that at least 2 of the goals were probably more individual Atalanta errors or them being slow to the ball than they were, Inter just dominating. But again, the way we were playing, I think we could have generated, and we did generate more chances than we finished, especially in that second half. So I think overall it was just a good performance by us. Atlanta were not at their best. I suspect they'll play a lot better down the stretch in the season. I still think that they have a really good shot of being in the top four and even battling, I think, for, second or third. But I don't think that beating Inter is going to be one of the things that they're going to be able to do. I feel like we have just a mental and skill superiority over these guys, and we're not afraid to assert it and flex it. And yesterday was just more of the same, the way it's been with us versus Gasparini and with us versus Atalanta. So overall, I think it was just a good performance, and I got to give credit to Barella. Like that guy, just like he does not score other than just banger volleys apparently, and that was just such a sweet goal. I was glad that he got it. I also read some stat that Barella is like the only Italian or is the only Serie A player who's had a goal and an assist in the last 8 years, or maybe it's like a only midfielder who's had a goal and assist in the last 8 years for Serie A. So clearly he's been around longer than I thought he's been around, and he's been delivering for a long time. So props to him for getting a nice goal.
Someone was circulating pictures of him on loan at Como on social media, which was a surprise to, I think, anyone who's followed his career this long. No one really knew he played there. Jay, as you look at the attack, Thuram has obviously been excellent. 3 goals through 3 games, along with this forced own goal. On the other side, Lautaro just hasn't quite gotten going yet, and he's not really involved in the play either. I'd say Thuram is the one making runs. Chances keep falling to him. Lautaro, I'd say, hasn't missed any big chances, but he also just hasn't created any big chances. So as we head into the international break, how concerned are you about Lautaro, or how excited are you about Thuram maybe having an emerging season?
Firstly, minor correction: Trauma has 4 goals in 3 games. He scored 2 braces, if I'm not mistaken. So he's playing really well.
That's right.
I recall distinctly at the start of last season, or the early part of last season, Irfan wanting to see more of that kind of number 9 poacher's instinct from Thuram, and I feel like the goals he's scored so far, especially the two against Atalanta, were really excellent examples of that. I mean, the game as a whole, the goals were kind of, dare I say, comical. You had some wild jumping left-footed outside of the box volley from Barella, followed by a crazy deflected own goal, followed by 2 very similar kind of second ball kind of goals. And what can I say? It was scrappy all round, and for Thuram to be in the thick of it and show that number 9 instinct and get those kind of scrappy finishes, I thought was a good sign of him maturing as a number 9. Minor shout out to Pavard as well, who was kind of in the thick of it for both of Thuram's goals. Or at least 2 goals. The first one, or the Barella goal, he assisted, if I'm not mistaken, he won the near post flick on, and then got to the second ball first and headed it back towards the centre for Barella to volley in. And then the Thuram goal, he was just right in the middle of it, kind of creating a bit of havoc by just being there and, pulling defenders and whatnot. So I was pleased to see those kind of minor things, if you want to call it that, from these guys, just making a telling contribution in the end. As far as Atalanta, yeah, they were really poor, and I kind of found it funny that Samardzic in particular was he was shocking. I think he's got a bit of a, he's got a bit of a stumbling block against us now, given the obvious history between us and the player. As for Lautaro, yeah, I thought he was clearly not fit. He looked laboured. He looked off the pace right from the get-go. Credit to him for making himself available to even play, considering he wasn't full fitness. But, I'm not overly worried about him or his ability to regain form. But what can I say? It's just not ideal that he's going to international duty when he's in this kind of recovery phase. So all I can hope is that he doesn't really play much, or doesn't, kind of make his injury worse, or kind of hamper his recovery by putting undue stress on his injuries. So, yeah.
You would hope he just wouldn't play much at all, but you just know the way these South American teams operate that he's going to end up playing 90 minutes at least once. He'll probably spell Alvarez in another game. It's just, I just remember sending like Sanchez there and him always playing 90 minutes for Chile. It just, this is how these things go. Barella is missing Italy international duty because he's having a nose operation. The guy must have like a deviated septum or something, because apparently it's going to help him breathe better. I just found that a little comical.
Just getting a big Kim Kardashian nose job.
That's right.
Fix that Italian nose of his.
There.
Speaking of hair transplants, I gotta say, Carlos Augusto's has not. The body has rejected the donor. It's just not really.
That's a long-term project. That's like a Thiago Tomas Palacios type project. You gotta wait for that to set in. You won't know for another year or two if that was a good move by him.
Clearly, he cheaped out and did not go to the same place Klaassen went, which is by far the best one I've ever seen completed.
Klaassen wasn't looking too flash when it started raining either. In any instance, I didn't know Barella was having a nose surgery.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. But I mean, the good news is apparently he's not going to be out very long. It's just it was a planned surgery, so, and obviously it's not affecting his play that much. So I imagine that he can only get better if he can breathe better when he's on the pitch. So that's good news for us. To really quickly touch on Lautaro, I mean, yeah, in no way am I concerned about Lautaro and his ability to score in this system. Obviously, he's proven that he's our guy. The only thing I would say is that I could tell that Simone really wanted him to score against Atalanta. That's why I think he left him on the pitch so long. And he does need to go ahead and open his account up. Hopefully, he can get that first goal against Monza because next after that we have Man City, and then after that we have Milan. So that's the only thing I would say is a little bit of a concern is that you don't want this to drag on for too long because we certainly need an informed Lautaro Martinez if we're going to get anything out of an away match at Manchester City. And then even in the Derby, he's been one of our deciding factors in the Derby so many times. He likes to score against Milan. They're one of his favorite opponents. So I guess at least we know if he is in the drought that after the Derby, that should be taken care of. But it'd be nice if it happened before that.
It is nice having the Monza fixture as soon as we return, just to smooth things over. We'll get into how the Champions League schedule complicates things, but obviously with the form we're in, the form Milan's in, we'd much rather play them now, today, next week, whatever. So having the international break's unfortunate, but at least with the international break coming out, Lautaro and all these players coming back from across the globe, I like having the Monza fixture just to settle into things. We can use some of the guys who aren't going on international duty and hopefully get an easy 3 points there. Any final thoughts from the Atalanta match? Any of you want to touch on? I'll take a man of the match performance or fun if you have one, although I feel like the obvious pick is Thuram.
Yeah, I'd say Taram. I appreciate the gesture for a shout out to Pavard because I do think that he played really well, and to me, he's still a player that has a little bit to prove for us. I mean, he had some really, really good performances last year, but both Pavard and Taram really didn't showcase their talents for the French national team. Now, I still think that that's a lot more to do with Deschamps and his just ridiculous style of football that he tried to trot out there than it is an indictment on Taram or Pavard. And Pavard didn't even play. I think they just have a lot of talent on that position. So it's fine, neither here nor there. But it's good to see both of them clicking and playing really well, especially since Pavard wasn't featured in that first match that we ended up drawing. So I think that's a good sign. Going back to the Lautaro thing, I think I'm not as concerned about it right now because whenever Lautaro doesn't score, my major concern is how are we going to get goals and who's going to score the goals. So the fact that Taram is kind of on point right now and looks to be in pretty good form and looks really excited and I'm for it, I think is a good sign. If Lautaro is going to have one of his droughts, he should have it now when Taram is still kind of clicking because both these guys can be a little streaky at times. Lautaro fixed a lot of that last year, but I think he's still prone to it as we saw towards the end of the last year. So I think it'd be nice if they can just time their slumps so they don't happen at the same time. So we're not relying on someone like, I don't know, Arnautovic. So I think overall, I think the team's done a good job of dispelling a lot of the doubts that people had after that first week. Long season to go, obviously, and a lot of these teams that are kind of floundering early, including Milan, are probably going to find their feet and find their form. So I think we have a lot to be happy about, but we'll see what ends up happening going forward.
Two things I want to touch on really quickly from the Atlanta match before we moved on. The first thing is the tactical movement in this team is getting crazier and crazier every season. I think that I saw in open play a Cherby pressing the goalkeeper, which just doesn't happen in normal football. I think Inzaghi has to be commended because he's doing things that I don't think that any other coach in Europe, to my knowledge, is doing, and he's doing it on a consistent basis. It's become part of our play where, Pavard was extremely high up the pitch at times yesterday, where even last season I did not see Pavard really join into the attack as much from that right center back position. Even Bisek was probably a little bit more progressive from that position than Pavard was. Obviously, yesterday he's involved. He does a back heel that leads to the first goal. So just overall, the movement of the team is kind of insane to watch and just open play with the way that we use our center backs and push them so forward all the time. I mean, it has to be exciting for the players to play. But also a bit complicated because it's high stakes football because if you turn the ball over at the wrong time, it obviously could be potentially a disaster. But we seem to continuously get away with it, and that's not by chance. That's by design. But I also feel like it's because we do play the same 11 so often that they just kind of move as one gelled unit. And the only concern with that is that when we do have to embed new players in, I don't know if they are going to be able to necessarily do the exact same things that starting 11 does just because they haven't had as much time to play together. So that was the first thing I wanted to touch on. And then the second thing I want to touch on was that Arnautovic chance, the one where he was laid in by Taremi late in the match, and then he tried to play
Fuck
it
that
back to.
guy. Fuck that guy.
No, see, I disagree. I actually think I wanted to commend Arnautovic for what he was trying to do there. Now, obviously, it didn't come off, and because of that, he kind of looked silly. But I think it just speaks to the feeling that's in the team and in the dressing room at the moment, where a guy like Arnautovic, who throughout his career, I don't think that anyone said that he's necessarily like a selfless player. When he was at some of these smaller clubs, obviously he was the guy, and so he kind of acted like that. But in this Inter side, he's fully aware of the fact that he's the fourth striker. So he's not going to be the first man off the bench. He knows his game time is going to be limited, and he doesn't seem to care. He's by all accounts a great person in the dressing room. He's been the number one cheerleader on the sidelines. He's kind of a glue guy. And he saw a chance yesterday or excuse me, on Friday to potentially open his account for the season, and instead he tried to give confidence to a guy who's brand new to the club, who is going to be our predominant backup striker, our third striker. And he said, "Hey, let me get this guy off the mark so that he can feel more comfortable and start scoring goals because that's what's best for the team, not what's best for Arnautovic." Because in reality, 5-0 versus 4-0 doesn't make a lot of difference for us, but Taremi having a goal does make a difference for this team overall because it just gives him some more confidence moving forward. So I actually liked what he tried to do there. Now, the second chance he missed, that's a whole different story. I think it was kind of a weird thing to hit his knee or whatever. And, I would like him to start scoring regularly as well. I think he does need some confidence in this shirt as well. But I think overall that the thought was in the right place with what he was trying to do yesterday, and I'll commend him for that.
Interesting take. I gotta say, I disagree. I took that as just a sign of he's just not a serious player. Like, even if we're winning 4-0, just don't fuck around. Like, just go for it. Just do the obvious thing, take the shot. And I mean, even if Taremi had continued his run and was kind of anticipating the pass back, the return pass, he was still sandwiched between two Atalanta defenders. So it wasn't even a guarantee that it wasn't like a 2-on-0 kind of situation where it was just Taremi against the goalkeeper. Just Arnautovic against the goalkeeper. There were still defenders in the play, involved there. So the fact that it occurred to him to pass to Taremi, and I don't know, like I said, I just took it as a sign that he's just not a serious guy. Yeah, I don't like that. I really don't like that. But hopefully you're correct here. That'll make me a lot happier. But I don't know, man. I don't know. He looks. I don't like his body language. Like, he's coming on. It's 4-0, and he's still like sulking around the place. I think he knew he fucked up on that one, and then the chance after that, the one you're talking about, where I like hit his thigh and went over the bar, he got like legitimately angry, like kicked to the net or something. So I think the frustration on that chance was probably compounded by him knowing that he fucked up on that pass to Taremi. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I just don't like his body language. I don't like the kind of lack of seriousness he has sometimes, and I don't like the fact that we even purchased him. But let's not go there again.
Well, yeah, his body language is one thing. I am not necessarily a fan of his body language either, and I mentioned that last season. But it doesn't seem to impact the team, and the team seems to absolutely love him, and so yeah, if his body language is a little off and it's impacting the team, that's a concern. But if it's not impacting the team, I'm not necessarily super concerned with it. But Irfan and Andrew, I like to hear your thoughts on that chance yesterday and what you think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I actually initially I thought that maybe you were giving him a little bit of a generous take, Sterling, but to be honest with you, I think there's something to that because he clearly has a locker room presence. He clearly brings something to the team because we've heard reports and a lot of other players kind of attest to that. So clearly there's something he's doing that's working really well. And so I wouldn't be, I don't think it's unreasonable to give him a generous take on that play. And I do think, look, I think that Arnautovic has stuff to offer the team. I know a lot of fans probably rightfully blame him for the Champions League exit last year, but the fact that he's now dropped in the pecking order to the fourth option, I don't think he is a bad fourth option. So I don't think that he's a completely useless or worthless player. I think we overpaid for him, and I think that taints the view of a lot of fans, rightfully so. But I don't think that he's completely worthless or useless. And I think that that take that you gave him on that play might not be inaccurate.
I just don't know what this guy is supposed to be for us. He's not a goal scorer. He's never been a goal scorer. He like if you look at the pecking order of forwards, Taremi's a more proven goal scorer. Arnautovic had like 10 goals once when it was at where was he even before this? I'm blanking Bologna. But even then, like this guy isn't someone who's going to put in 15. So I'm like, okay, he's not the most technical finisher. That's fine. But then you look at his other skills, and it's like, what are we working with here? He's slow. It's not like he's an expert dribbler by any means. He's. I find he's a bit of a static player. He's a little clumsy when he runs with the ball. He doesn't have the pace to beat defenders. I just don't really know what he's supposed to do for this team, other than a we're out of bodies, throw him in. And the pass to Taremi was extremely puzzling, and the Taremi had absolutely no idea the ball was going to him. And when you think about Taremi being such a elite goal scorer for a long time when he was playing in Portugal, I think he knows as a forward what Arnautovic should have done in that situation, and that's why he was completely flustered when Arnautovic made the wrong decision. So, like Irfan said, like I'm fine that Arnautovic is here as the fourth forward. I understand there were no options to get rid of him, but I just don't see how this guy ever provides us with value. He doesn't look great with Taremi because the skill sets are a little redundant. The only guy he really works with is probably Taram, and if that's the case, there means something wrong with Lautaro. So I'm I'm kind of over it. He's here. I'm hoping we wind down his contract, but if Arnautovic has to play a critical role with this team this year, we're in big trouble.
No, I
The
agree with that.
the
I think we're talking about two
other
different things, though. To be fair, I think that
That's fair.
there's yeah. I mean, I think there's does Arnautovic fit this squad is one thing, and I think that we would certainly like a different profile of striker, someone who's probably more similar to a Thuram would be a better fit for the four striker position. I think that's why we were so heavily chasing Goodmanson initially in the summer, but he is here now. I do think that he will play a significant role in this team. I don't think he's as bad maybe as he has looked in an Inter shirt so far, but I do think that his heart at least is in the right place and he's trying to do the right things. Is all I was trying to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I just at this level, that's not enough for me. The other player I want to talk about just quickly is Zelensky and maybe his lack of appearances the last three matches. I was a little disappointed yesterday. I thought it would be, or Friday, it'd be a natural opportunity for us to get him some minutes when we were up big. Not sure what his fitness levels are at. I was having some conversations in the forum, which led to me to do some digging, and I found out that Mkhitaryan has not scored a goal for Inter since the Milan Derby last year. And in the last 6 months or so, he only has two assists. So his offensive play has fallen off a bit as he played more and more minutes last season. So was anyone surprised Zelensky didn't get a runtime at all during these last three matches?
No,
Slash,
no. I
or
told
go
you
ahead.
guys, Mkhitaryan is going to play 90 minutes twice a week, He's getting the Dzeko treatment from Inzaghi. It's probably my biggest red flag slash concern that I have with Inzaghi. He just loves Mkhitaryan, and I don't think I'm not convinced that he thinks that Zielinski is a proper replacement or sub for him. I think he will sparingly use him, and I think we're just going to see Mkhitaryan play over and over and over and over again, 90 minutes plus, twice a week, with very, frayed, inconsistent results. Like, yes, he can do some beautiful things on the pitch, but it's hard for him to do that when he's playing 90 minutes twice a week. And that's what we're going to see. And it's my biggest concern going into the season. It's my biggest concern with Inzaghi. I'm just not convinced that Zielinski is going to be good enough in Inzaghi's eyes to be a proper replacement or sub. And we're thinking to see Mkhitaryan. Now, if Mkhitaryan saves all his goals for when we play against Milan, I'm fine with that. Feel free to score a couple of bangers against Milan. I'm good with that. That could ride me. That could ride him in my eyes for probably half the season. But I think that this is going to be the norm, man. I think we just need to accept it. Zielinski will play here and there, but we're not going to see him phase out or even get consistent playing time because Inzaghi loves Mkhitaryan.
You hit on a point, Irfan, that I've been thinking about the past couple days, which I was not thrilled with the Zelensky signing when it was first announced. And my problem with it was I didn't know where this guy was going to fit into our team. And is there any credence to the thought that Zelensky should not be playing as this box to box kind of dribbling midfielder, and he should instead be the vice Hakan, playing as more of a regista, distributing the ball? And I say that because, and I might be beating a dead horse here, but Asllani has a lot of experience playing as a box to box midfielder, especially for the Albanian national team. Is he the more natural Mkhitaryan replacement than Zelensky, just from a skill set perspective? What do you think?
I think it's possible. It's an intriguing thought because I do think that Asllani can probably play better for the squad if he plays further up. But to be honest, I still don't think that either of those are the right fit for these guys. I mean, Asllani in that position, I think, is just too slow and too deliberate in his decision making to be able to play the kind of one touch passes and dribbling that Mkhitaryan can sometimes pull off. Um, and Zielinski playing deeper, I don't know. Honestly, like we talked about this when we got him last year. I don't understand where his best use is. And maybe it's just because I don't know him well enough and I didn't watch Napoli well enough when he was regarded as a really, really, really good Serie A midfielder. I don't know what his best use is. To me, it still seems like he's kind of like Fratesi in the sense that there's no great one for one replacement with a current Inter player. And they both kind of seem to do maybe what Barella does on the pitch more than what Hakan or Mkhitaryan do. But again, I don't know, Sterling, Jay, if you guys have thoughts, because it's not clear to me that either of those two guys, Asllani and Zielinski, necessarily can fit one for one with any of our starting three.
Yeah, I don't think either of them are necessarily a good fit for Hakan's position. I certainly don't see that with Zelensky. Aslani, I think, actually still probably is a better fit in that role between the two of them, but I still don't think Aslani is a great fit there either. I was actually kind of hoping that Tessman rumor came to fruition because I feel like long term he's probably more of a true holding midfielder. I think that both Zielinski and Aslani are probably better suited to playing in that left center mid position than they are as some type of a regista. I personally do think that Zielinski fits into our system in that left center mid position. Um, when I've watched him at Napoli, he does seem to carry the ball very well. He also has the ability that Mkhitaryan doesn't to actually turn with his back facing the opponent's goal and actually create a situation from that with a quick touch around a pressing defender. I've seen him do that many times in a Napoli jersey. I think that he can be a good fit in our system. The real concern with Zielinski is more so on the defensive side of the ball, not on the offensive side of the ball, in my opinion. We kind of discount sometimes the work that Mkhitaryan puts in on the defensive side of things, because he is really good at intercepting the ball. He's tactically very astute. He's always going to be in the right positions. So, he is a really good defensive player for us, which also helps mask the fact that we don't play with the true defensive midfielder. We have, Hakan, who is a converted attacking midfielder who has come on leaps and bounds in terms of the defensive side of his game, but he's still not a natural defensive midfielder. So when you don't play with a true defensive midfielder, all three of the midfielders have to do a little bit of defense. Obviously, Barella does that. Mkhitaryan does that extremely well, and then Hakan has done that extremely well as well. And I think that's what you see when Asllani steps in, for example, for Hakan. All of a sudden, he doesn't have that same bite defensively that Hakan does, and all of a sudden we start to look a lot more shaky on the defensive side of things. I think you have the same thing with Zielinski in that role. I think that long term, we still need somebody who's a more natural fit as a holding player, as a true Hakan backup. We had one for one season with Brozovic, and that just kind of happened by chance because, of course, he was a starter, and then by the end of the season, he was not. But yeah, it's a question as to who, between Zielinski and Asllani. I think both of them probably are a better fit to that left center mid position. We know who's going to get the actual minutes there is going to be Zielinski. Asllani will continue to be the backup regista because, once you're a certain position in Inzaghi's mind, you stay that way forever. So, we're going to continue to see Asllani play a little bit deeper, which, for this season, I'm okay with. But I think we do need to find a way to start getting Zielinski some minutes in this team. And he should have played, in my mind, against Atalanta for at least, 15 minutes or so. We don't know what his fitness level is at the moment. That's the only thing I will say is obviously he missed some time here towards the end of the preseason in the first match because of a niggling injury. So maybe he's not fully fit yet, but this guy, in my mind, should be playing significant minutes this season in that position, even if he's not the starter and we want to use Mkhitaryan in the bigger games. We just can't use him for 90 minutes twice a week the way that we have been because we've seen what it does to him by the end of the season. So I'm hoping that that's not the way that we're going to go. But with Inzaghi, you just never know. He really could continue to ride him the way that he has historically and give Zielinski not a ton of minutes. But I'm hoping that that's going to change because Inzaghi does like experienced players, and you can't say Zielinski is not experienced.
Jay, I'll give you the final word on this topic.
I'd like to see Zielinski sooner than later. Yeah, I guess I'm a touch disappointed that he hasn't featured at all yet, although obviously part of it's got to do with him just returning from injury. As for Asllani, I agree with what Sterling was saying that we lose a lot of that bite when Asllani comes on the pitch to replace Hakan. I do think there's a chance he could be a better, or he could play or perform better as one of the central mids rather than the holding mid. I just don't think he's yet developed like the kind of game sense to play that role with the kind of authority needed. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that we tend to lose control of games when he comes on to replace Hakan. Having said that, I don't know if his skill set truly suits the centre mid position either. I don't want to kind of just shit on the guy, but I just don't really think he's a particularly good prospect. Like I feel he's pretty ordinary at most things. Seems to have a fairly cultured shot. We've seen him take a few long shots that have gone close, and he had one really nice finish last season. But beyond that, I think I just don't really know what he brings. And this kind of actually brings me to something I was thinking of when I saw the Champions League draw and like the extra matches, and maybe we can kind of transition to talking about the Champions League draw. But that draw is harder than I first thought. We've got the likes of Man City away, Arsenal at home, Bayer Leverkusen away, and then Leipzig at home, Monaco. These are not like terrible sides, and even Young Boys away is not a walk in the park, right? So it's kind of like a follow-on thought, but basically, I'm looking at the draw, going, okay, this is a fairly tough series of opponents, so to speak. On top of that, we all know that Juventus has strengthened significantly. We know that, I guess, the squad. Look, we haven't brought in any like major pieces, is what I'm saying. So, relatively speaking, the strength of the squad I guess, is no better than it was last season. I think it's fair to say. So we haven't. You can almost say we haven't improved the squad. And if a certain if a certain Finnish leftist was here, he'd argue that we don't need to improve the squad when we finished 21 points ahead of second place, and that's actually a fair argument. But I just really worry that our midfield is actually quite thin in terms of quality, because I don't rate Asllani very much for the DM position. And like I said, for the CM position, I'm at best unconvinced. I'm willing to see the experiment, but I don't think it's like any guarantee of success. I don't think he's, I don't look at Asllani and go, oh my God, Inzaghi's misusing him so much. Can't he see he's so much better suited for that Mkhitaryan position? He should be playing there or whatever. It's more like a case of, I think this guy's kind of shit at DM, so may as well try him out at CM kind of thing, at least for me. And so we have one, again, my personal opinion, we have one subpar Hakan replacement. We have one Mkhitaryan replacement who I think is pretty quality, but again, I keep saying this, it's up to him to prove he's the same player he was 2 years ago, because last season he wasn't great, and this season obviously hasn't shown anything yet. So, and Mkhitaryan himself, I think, is a really, really dwindling quality right now. And that leaves us with essentially two kind of solid or rock solid midfielders in Barella and Hakan. And I personally am quite concerned about the depth of quality in the squad. I think our mercato was frankly abysmal. I really think we're going to be stretched thin this season. We have to really pray that we're lucky on the injury side of things, that we don't have any key players out for any lengths of time. And yeah, I know, I went a bit off track there onto the kind of wider picture, but that is the way I see it. Like the midfield, debate between Asllani or Mkhitaryan or Zielinski as LCM alternative or whatever. That's all just a microcosm of this squad is not large enough, in my opinion. And I know it's obviously irrevocably kind of linked with the financial situation, because we simply can't afford better players in a sense. But yeah, I just really think it's a reflection of the greater, well, the bigger picture here is the squad in itself. Like I said, I just don't rate a lot of the backup options, and I think we're going to be really pushed far this season. I think it'll be significantly harder to win the league this season. I'm relying heavily on like Inzaghi's style of play to kind of just be better than other teams, because I don't think we can rely on a lot of the players to kind of pull a lot of quality out of nowhere. And yeah, final words. Again, I think this was a dog shit mercato. To be honest, I give it like a 3.
So, one thing I want to say is that I do think that the squad, though, has gotten better overall in terms of, I think Zelensky is an obvious upgrade over Klaassen and whatever sense he was last season. And I do think that Taremi is an upgrade on Arnautovic or Sanchez being the first person off the bench. You could even probably argue that maybe Martinez is a slightly better version of Audero. I'm not happy necessarily with the Martinez signing thus far. I don't really think it was a good allocation of our resources, but I think that we did strengthen certain departments. And well, I do hear what you're saying, Jay, in terms of, the midfield. I don't think the midfield is our biggest concern here. I think it's probably the defense. Personally, I still think that center back role really is the one that concerns me the most, because we have a very old Cherby there, and then a DeVry who is a little bit younger, still not a young player. Is struggling with an injury at the moment, and you never know when that can become ongoing, lingering type of issue because he is in that age where that can start to become a little bit of a concern. And then obviously his standard and his play at that level sometimes can be a bit of a concern if we're talking about like Champions League, for example. I am concerned with the amount of matches that we're going to have to play because we rely on some aging players like Darmian and Cherby and Mkhitaryan. You know, those are big pieces of what we're doing, but I do think that overall our squad has actually gotten a little bit better than it was last season in terms of overall depth. Now, has our starting 11 gotten better? I don't think so. No, it hasn't really changed. And, you know, we can certainly both agree that we probably should have some changes in our starting 11. I think, you know, Jay always says a team should always be looking to get better. Otherwise, you're kind of getting worse. And I actually agree with that sentiment. You should always be trying to do some incremental improvements. But I do think that we have added some depth pieces in the mercato, even Palacios, I guess, is a depth piece that you know it's hard to say he's an upgrade on anybody because we just didn't have anybody before. You know, we were just basically using Carlos Augusto twice as a backup, which obviously just having a body there does indeed help us in a way because now he can just focus on being the backup for DeMarco full time, who does need a backup, despite the fact that he was running like crazy against Atalanta. He's somebody who definitely across the season starts to show some wear and tear. So, you know, I don't love the Mercato. You know, I think we all wish that we could have done more. If I had to give it a grade, I'd probably give it a C plus. But I do think that we did overall incrementally improve the squad.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll say this: context is important, and where we find ourselves right now as a club is an extremely dangerous, precarious situation, and the fact that the bottom just didn't fall out with the sheer mismanagement of Suning through this whole process, I think is a testament to the fact that this club is stable and resilient ultimately. Like, I don't know. I share similar frustrations with the Mercato in a vacuum, but we're not in a vacuum, right? Like we have the context of what's going on the ownership front. We have a context of what's going on with the debt, with the finances. And so, you know, the fact that we didn't sell or have to sell a major contributor or two, frankly, I think has to be weighed in any evaluation of our mercato. And so, yeah, in the grand scale of things, like I don't think we improved the squad tremendously. I agree with Sterling that I think we are a deeper squad, and I think Zelensky and Taremi, you know, slotting in the pecking order, are upgrades over what we had last year. But again, I think we could have done more, and I think we should have done more if we're going to try to lock up the Scudetto and seriously fight on other fronts, including the Champions League. But again, where we are, what happened this offseason, the fact that, you know, our long-term owners basically forfeited their ownership in the club because they couldn't pay their debt, and now we're owned by what is known as a essentially like distressed debt fund in the US, and the result was that we didn't sell, you know, any of our major players, I think is a huge win and sigh of relief. So I think we have to look at that and consider that when we consider the mercato. I'll also say, going back a few years to the way Suning was operating our mercato, I think there's a couple of kind of illusions, right? I mean, we sold Lukaku for an insane amount of money, just like a ridiculous all-time fleece job, and that funded a decent amount, even though we actually didn't end up spending that season a lot of the money that we got for Lukaku. Um, and then the next year, we essentially sold Onana in another all-time fleece job that helped fund the Mercado and helped fund additional players coming in. And
And went to a
so,
Champions League final. Can't forget that income as well.
yeah, and we didn't have any of that like this year. Like I can't think of a player that would have been like a sizable asset. Like let's say somebody who could have gotten us 25 mil or more. I can't think of somebody like that on this squad that I think would have been worth selling. Now, if you want to make the argument that we should have fielded an offer for Lautaro and sold high or done something like that, I think you can make that argument. Bastoni, I think, was wanted by Liverpool. But if you do that, then you also run the risk of not spending that money. It's just too risky to try that approach this year with the change in ownership and the general uncertainty with the squad and with the management. So I don't know. I kind of feel like you have to put all that into context. The players we got certainly are not impressive. And to be honest, like I don't think we would have gotten Zielinski or Taremi if those deals hadn't been cut before Oak Tree took over for Suning. But I think in the grand context, and if you look at everything that's happened, I don't think this was a bad mercato. I think it kind of stabilized us in the grand scheme of things, and I think we'll be better off because of it. Now, if we're sitting here talking the same way next summer, after hopefully things have stabilized a little bit and we're still not spending and we're still looking for these players that frankly no one's heard of, then I think that is a concern, especially as some of our core players are getting a year older. But as of right now, I'm not at a 5 alarm fire, nor do I think this is like a disastrous mercato by any stretch of the imagination, because I think we have to keep the context in mind. The last thing I'll say is that we did spend a lot of money this mercato, and it was because of these obligatory loan obligations that we had for players like Fratesi and Arnautovic and Augusto. And so we're pretty net negative going into this season as it is because Suning wrote a bunch of checks that Oak Tree ended up having to cash. So that's the risk that you run when you do this deferred purchase kind of strategy. If you're not around to pay that bill, then the new ownership has to pay it. And I don't think Oak Tree is going to be in that business of cutting a lot of deals where they have to have like significant deferred payments. So I think this is part of that transition in ownership that we're all kind of having to live through. So again, I think that context is important to mention. But again, yeah, I would have loved to see us grab a few bigger names and better players to kind of supplement the squad. But I just didn't think that was in the cards to begin with. So my expectations were already pretty low.
Oak Tree isn't going to be having a lot of those deferred deals because they're not willing to spend anything more than 7 million euros on a player. No, I gave the Mercato a similar score to Jay. I had it scored at a 4 out of 10. Irfan, you made a great point, which is even in the Suning years, when we were making large sales, we were not reinvesting much of the proceeds. Lukaku was sold for 110 million to Chelsea, and we reinvested 30 million in Crea. Onana was sold for 50 million. We did not spend that entire 50 million. We also sold Brozovic that summer. The the good thing about the Mercato is that we did not have a large sale, and I'm certain that if Zhang was here, for whatever reason, we never really figured out why, Zhang always required large capital gains in order to fund our Mercatos. And I'm not sure if that was a like cash shortage thing or if that was a like he needs to achieve certain income metrics for loan covenant thing. Regardless, he always demanded large sales, and I'm convinced if he would have stayed on, we definitely would have sold Dumfries to the highest bidder if there were any bidders, and we probably would have been marketing Thuram for that sweet capital gain when you think about what he's worth versus what his cost basis is. So it's nice that we didn't have to do that, but it really gets you to the same place at the end of the day, which is okay, we didn't have a large sale under Oak Tree, so we didn't bring in any reinforcements. Oak Tree didn't give us a transfer budget, which is fine. If we did have a transfer budget, we used it on a reserve keeper. If you look at the problems we identified in this squad going into the summer, I don't know if any of them have been solved. Everyone on this podcast wanted a central center back, knowing the Ryan Acerbi's contracts expire next season. We weren't even linked to one. So clearly management disagreed. We all would have loved to see something resolved in the forward departments. Instead, we're keeping Crea in the squad and Arnautovic is sticking around as your fourth striker. Dumfries still not resolved. He's not under contract beyond this season, but we also didn't entertain any offers for him because apparently there were none. So as a result, we might need him back, a right wing back, for multiple seasons if we can reach an extension. We did not replace Darmian as a right wing back, and it looks like he's going to play a large role there. There's a lot of negatives to find, and I'm trying not to be too negative. If you want the silver lining, it's that we're bringing back a Scudetto caliber squad. We probably didn't need a ton of money. It's just frustrating, right? Because if you look at this team, you know that if we had given Morata 50 million, 30 million, he could have rounded out, smoothed out some of the edges, produced a team that could not only compete for the Scudetto, but also challenge for a Champions League run. We don't have that now. I'd say, and I want to get into this next, but I'd say a successful season this year is going to be Scudetto challenge combined with get out of the first round of this new look Champions League.
Yeah, and to make things even worse, I think you've got Morata trying to do what he does, or trying to do what he did under Suning, which is operate on a minimal cost basis and signing players who are free agents of a certain pedigree. Again, I'm just going to keep using the Hermoso deal. I am just mind blown that we didn't sign him. That deal just made all the sense in the world. And like I said, you've got Morata trying to do what he does best, and you've got Oak Tree essentially just cock blocking him. And the result is this kind of weird semi Suning, semi Oak Tree mercato where the signings approved under Suning, Zielinski and Taremi, are the only ones of any remote quality, both free agents, both 30 or thereabouts. And then you've got the Oak Tree signings, which are fucking Martinez for 15 million and some other shithead who no one's ever heard of. What's his name? Tony something? Thomas Palacio? Like, who the fuck is this guy? It's why are we signing a left centre back when we've already got viable options there? It's like I said, it's just it's an absurd way of approaching a mercato, and I am glad that Sterling kind of also raised the concept of just incremental growth and improving upon improving. And I just can't believe we're going into this season with the exact same starting lineup as we did last season, with key players like Mkhitaryan and Acerbi and Sommer all being a year older, a year longer in the tooth. Sommer already looking like shit. Mkhitaryan already looking the same as he did last season. Acerbi is, although it was kind of funny, the last thing I need to see from a 35-year-old Acerbi who's just recovered from groin surgery is him chasing down the opposition keeper. He nearly died after that yesterday. So, yeah, I think the kind of good mood about Thuram and the emphatic win over Atalanta, it's all kind of papering over some cracks, and hoping that we're not going to get those cracks aren't going to get exposed this season.
Let's dive into talking about this Champions League group stage draw. So a new look Champions League format this year. There are going to be 8, I don't know if you can call it group stage, but 8 like league phase matches. And we have one of the tougher schedules I've seen thrown out there. Jay, you touched on some of the bigger matches. It all starts with Man City, a rematch of the Champions League final for a couple years ago in Manchester, the week of the first Milan derby. Irfan, what do you think of that match? How do you rate our chances? Do you think we're dead men walking, or do you think we can give these guys a game going on the road?
I think we can give these guys a game. Honestly, if we're playing our starters, I think we can give anybody a game. Whether we can actually win, I don't know. But, I think it's fair to say it's a toss-up. Maybe this is Serie A and Inter fan delusion talking here, trying to be too much of a homer. But I don't know. I honestly, I like our chances against anybody. I do wish that Lautaro was in his torrid form, because I think he's a little bit more reliable in form than so far Thuram has been. I don't expect that we're going to get a lot of individual mistakes the way, we've benefited so far early in the Serie A season. But I don't know. I think it's a toss up. I think if we have the right mentality and if we're prepared, I think we can go up against anybody and get a good result.
I mean, I think who haven't we given a game under Inzaghi in Champions League realistically? We've already played this Manchester City team. We gave them a game in the Champions League final. They are a different beast at home. That should be stated. They do tend to travel a little bit poorly, and I guess you could argue a neutral venue would probably also maybe play into that. But I can't really think of a match where we've really just been played off the pitch and embarrassed by anybody. So I think that giving them a game is pretty much a guarantee. Now, whether or not we actually get something from that game, that's a whole different story. I don't know if you guys have been watching Manchester City so far this year, but Holland, unlike many other top level players, had a whole summer off, and it seems like he took full advantage of that. He looks very refreshed. He looks very sharp. He scored a hat trick yesterday against West Ham. He looks
That
like
was
he
his
should. He
second
looks the real deal.
consecutive hat trick.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we talk about, how Thuram has looked to start the season. I mean, Holland looks ridiculous right now. He's in probably maybe his best form since he's been there, which is again saying something because he's never been in bad form there. So, yeah, I think that it's going to be an extremely tough match. You're kind of glad that it's the first match, so you can kind of get it out of the way because on paper it's certainly the toughest one. And if you come out with no points, it's not the end of the world. There's certainly no shame in losing away at Manchester City. I mean, obviously, you never want to lose. We are Inter, right? Morata has said that many times in the press that we want to live up to that. But let's be realistic here. If we go on the road to Manchester City and we lose in a tight game, I don't think anybody's going to lose a ton of confidence from that. So, it's good to at least get that out of because it's kind of a free hit, right? It's like, hey, if we manage to get something out of that and we kind of surprise the world, I don't know if we really surprise Inter fans, but if we go ahead and shock the world and somehow manage to win or even a draw from that match, it's like a huge bonus and a huge plus for us. Otherwise, it's just like, hey, kind of business as usual, and then we start to focus on these other fixtures. I think if you look at how this whole Champions League new league format thing works, the key is going to be obviously getting the most out of your home matches, and then beating the small teams even when you're on the road. I think is the way to that top eight, which is obviously the goal. But even if we don't make the top eight, there's no reason why we shouldn't be in that middle pack at a bare minimum to at least make it through. We are a good enough team to be able to do that. I do agree with what Jay said. This is actually a deceptively tough draw. And it's not tough because of the pot A teams that we got. It's actually tougher because of some of the pot 2 and 3 teams that we got. Having to play Leverkusen away is going to be an extremely tough match. We do have Leipzig at home, which is a little easier, obviously, than going on the road. But that's where the draw is tougher. Pulling teams like Leipzig and Leverkusen, everyone has to deal with 2 of the pot A teams, so everyone's going to have to play with a Man City or an Arsenal or whoever that may be. But and actually Leverkusen's the other pot A team I should mention, not Arsenal. But that's where it gets tougher when you pull teams like Arsenal and Leipzig. Even Monaco is a sneaky team. Young boys. This is a real test, and so we'll see how we do with it. I'm still pretty confident with the team and Inzaghi. Again, the number one concern is not our top end quality. It's really the fixture congestion and how some of these older legs are going to hold up with it as we kind of go deeper into this because there are added matches. We are going to be playing Champions League matches in December and in January. That's a new thing. Usually, the new year is for knockout stages, and you kind of know who you're going to be playing for quite a while. In this one, you go into December and January still playing in this league phase before it then switches to the playoff format. So that's going to be a little bit of a interesting wrinkle. It's a little bit more drawn out, and obviously that just goes to the fact of they were missing out on revenue during the holiday period from the Champions League, and that just can't happen. So they obviously wanted to go ahead and stretch that out. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this new format works out. I'm not necessarily a fan of it in theory. I don't like that there's not return legs to play these teams, and I also don't like that there's additional games, but that's partially because we have an aging squad. So I'll be interested to see how it plays out. But yeah, it's I would expect Inter still to be a top 8 team. I think that's the goal that we should be shooting for. And then, you know, I think a quarterfinal is realistic for this squad, and anything better than that, I'd say well done to the boys in Inzaghi.
I don't love the new format for a lot of the reasons you laid out, Sterling, but I have to admit it is exciting seeing some of these teams on the schedule. We haven't played Arsenal in a very long time. It's been 15, 20 years since we last played Arsenal in a competitive match, I want to say, at home. Then obviously we played City recently, but even if you look at Leverkusen, excited to see them, Monaco. It's an exciting fixture list. It's just our 8 league matches, whatever you want to call these things, necessary in the first phase of the Champions League. It's an obvious cash grab. So grappling with those two ideas of it being cash grab / being excited about some of these matches, but it's a tough group. You have to expect us to advance from the group. That has to be the expectation when you're Inter and when you're one of the best teams in the group. But it's hard not to be concerned when you, like you said, we have an aging squad. We have a squad that doesn't have a ton of depth. This is not going to be an easy job by any stretch of the imagination. Jay, do you think we get out of this group?
I think so. I think so. Could have got a bit luckier with the pot 2 team being Arsenal. We've got, and Leverkusen, we've got literally the champions of England, the runners-up of England, and the champions of Germany, and obviously us as the champions of Italy. And then you're playing against the likes of Young Boys and Red Star. Red Star is
We
probably,
avoided Spanish sides.
thankfully. I don't know. Did Red Star win the Serbian league last season? Who the fuck knows? Did Slavia or did Sparta Praha win their Czech league last season? I don't know. But in any instance, it's a tough fixture list, and like I said, it just compounds the concern of the thin squad and the I guess just the lack of quality signings. Look at the other teams in pot 1. You've got Real Madrid, Man City, Bayern Munich, PSG, Liverpool, Dortmund, Leipzig, and Barca. And without having looked at any of their transfer business, I'm pretty confident in saying we probably had by far the most humble transfer window of any of the pot 1 teams, probably even of the pot 2 teams as well, minus Club Brugge. So yeah, I think comparatively we're not, I guess, bringing in the kind of quality that we want to really embed ourselves among those pot 1 elite teams, and that's a kind of bigger picture concern. But I do still hope that, or rather expect us to get through. My only concern is like I said, the squad quality and the inability to kind of rotate with much conviction. I really dread the idea of going away and playing Leverkusen, and I don't know, what if we had to play like Asllani or or Taremi or Arnautovic or something because Thuram's played 4 games in a row or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit concerning. But yes, I do think we should progress.
Irfan, what about you? Do you think we get out of this group?
Yeah, I think so. I agree. It's a tough list of fixtures for us. I think we didn't really get a lot of luck when it comes to the draw, but given the format and given the standard, I think a lot of this is kind of it's kind of just like lipstick on a pig sort of thing. Ultimately, I think they still want the best squads to go to the knockout round, and so I suspect that the way this is going to work out is you're going to see not a lot of surprises. Like, you're not going to see a lot of teams from those bottom pots make it into the top 8 or whatever it is that you need here. So to be honest, I still don't fully understand this format or what the hell happened in that draw. But I see the fixture list, and there are some tough matches, but they'll be intriguing and they'll be fun. And I expect us to scrape by and get into the top 8. So, we have some tough fixtures, but like you said, it's going to be exciting to see us play the likes of Arsenal and Leverkusen. I think will be a great match. So I'm excited for it. But yeah, I expect us to get through and get to the next round for sure.
Well, I'm looking forward to these matches. It's tough that we already have an international break. It feels like we should be in the middle of fixtures, and instead we're taking a week off here, letting everyone play before we return back to Serie A games. But like we said at the top, once the Monza fixture wraps up, you're diving straight into Man City, so at least it's an exciting time. I will conclude, as always, with Jay's hot betting tips.
I think we're going to lose against Man City. That's my hot betting tip. Score 2-0. Haaland 2 goals.
That is honestly more optimistic of a prediction than I expected from you.
Very good.
All right, let's wrap up there. Irfan, any big birthday plans?
No, not much. I was on vacation last week, partly to celebrate the birthday. So now looking forward to just having kind of a low-key weekend with family. So thanks again for kicking off the birthday with a nice episode and a nice Inter win. And we'll see how it goes.
It only gets worse from here.
That's the spirit.
I don't know if you can say that, Jay, as you have less time on this earth than Irfan. Can you really give him that dose to reality?
Get ready for that fantastic gift of yet another necktie, pair of socks.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Kids buying you like gardening supplies with the money you gave them.
I know gift giving definitely gets a little odd, or gift receiving gets a little odd as you get older because, kind of all flows through your own pocketbook. So it's always interesting to see what they come up with. But I'm excited. My kids will do something fun, I'm sure. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, come on, man. Irfan doesn't do his own gardening. He has people for that.
Mexicans, yeah.
All right. Well,
we'll end it there.
Yep, I'm just gonna kill this one there. Sterling, thanks for potting with us. We'll catch you all next.
Hola.
All right, thanks.
All right, guys, have a good one.